Let's begin in Montreal, because this is the last day of the Assembly of First Nations annual meeting. And just a short time ago, we heard a speech from the Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. It's the first time he's spoken at the AFN in person. CBC's JP Tasker was listening in, and he joins us now from Ottawa. So JP, what stood out for you?
Well, Pierre Poilievre gave a quite well-regarded speech to the Assembly of First Nations just a short while ago, getting a lot of applause line. A lot of lines of his were getting applauses from the crowd, which was quite remarkable because the last time, Natasha, he delivered a message, a video message, mind you, in 2022, he got a lot of boos from the crowd. This time, a warmer reception for a man who could very well be Prime Minister. Maybe some of the Indigenous chiefs, the First Nations chiefs that have gathered in Montreal, are recognizing that maybe they should have some good relations with the man who could very well be in charge of the federal government after the general election in 2025. The main theme of Pierre Poilievre's message today was all about reconciliation, economic reconciliation, Natasha, really hammering home the point that if he is elected, if he forms a government next year, that he will dismantle the bureaucracy that stands in the way of economic development on First Nations land. That's what he's saying. He says he wants natural resources projects to go through, but with more money for First Nations communities that house some of these projects. He says that he wants to get Ottawa out of the way when it comes to divvying up the economic pie. He wants more money to go to Indigenous communities themselves and less of it going here to the federal treasury in Ottawa. He was also talking about taxes. He wants First Nations to have more authority over taxation on their lands. Again, kind of get Ottawa out of the picture. Some of the lines that really were well received was him saying he wants Indigenous children to be some of the richest there are in the world. A big applause line for that one, saying that resource development is the ticket to an economic future where there's a lot of prosperity for Indigenous kids and youth. Also saying that foreign workers should not stand in the way of Indigenous people getting jobs in this country, saying it shouldn't be temporary foreign workers that fill a lot of the labor gaps in this country, that Indigenous youth should be getting some of those jobs. Another big applause line for that one. Let's listen to a little bit of what Pierre Poilievre had to say. You'll get a flavor of his message to the Chiefs. Have a listen.
These Indigenous values, faith, family, work, tradition, entrepreneurship, and land will guide everything I do as Prime Minister. But let me be clear, I'm not here to run your life. I don't want to run anybody's life. I want to run a small government with big citizens, free to make their own decisions and live their own lives.
It wasn't all positive for Pierre Poilievre. Just after that speech, he took some questions from some of the chiefs that were assembled there in the room, including from Judy Wilson, who's a chief from British Columbia. You may know that name from her opposition to the Trans Mountain Pipeline. She was saying that she heard nothing in Poilievre's speech about climate change. She heard nothing about the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, of course, an important piece of legislation that's now Canadian law that kind of dictates how the relationship with Ottawa should go about. And she heard nothing about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, of course, something the past Conservative government stood in the way of. They didn't want to have an inquiry into that issue. Chief Wilson saying that she felt like Poilievre let the crowd down by not addressing some of those issues that are top of mind for a lot of chiefs there.
So sort of a mixed reaction from some of the folks that were there, but this speech was important for Poilievre to make. Explain to us why that is.
Yeah, I think that he has a mixed history, if you will, with the Indigenous community in this country. You may remember, Natasha, back in 2008, just as former Prime Minister Stephen Harper was about to deliver his apology and address on the Indian residential school system, Pierre Poilievre went on a local radio station here in Ottawa to say that First Nations people do not need more compensation. They don't need more handouts. They just need to work harder. They have to have a better work ethic. Comments that were widely derided, including within his own government. Harper was not happy that that sort of thing stepped all over his really landmark apology to First Nations people about the horrors of the Indian residential school system. So Pierre Poilievre has to turn the page, if you will, and he certainly started to do that today. And I think that the other thing we should note that's really important, Natasha, is it's not just about words to these chiefs in Montreal. He's also recruiting a lot of star Indigenous candidates to run for the Conservative Party in the next general election. Folks who are really well known, like Cree First Nations leader Billy Morin in Alberta. He's a big figure in the First Nations world. Of course, Alice Ross, a former MLA in British Columbia, has also been recruited to run for the Conservatives. So Pierre Poilievre making an effort, trying to reach out to First Nations people in particular, trying to bring them on side. As polls show, he has about a 15, 16-point lead nationwide. He wants to have some of those First Nations folks in his camp. Natasha?
JP Tasker in Ottawa. Thank you, JP.
Thank you.